For USCFootball.com, Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino. Chris, we're here on campus after USC's Wednesday practice of the second bye week. How's it going?
It started a little rough because we're wearing the same shirt, but it got cold enough where we needed our jackets, so I'm okay right now.
So, ton of observations. Jakeem Stewart didn't practice today after practicing yesterday. Looks like he's just on a one practice a week regimen right now with some sort of injury. A couple other guys were out, but nothing unexpected. Everything kind of seems like bumps and bruises, bye week maintenance.
Yeah, just typical bye week maintenance. They're sitting a couple of the rotational linebackers, sitting a couple of the rotational defensive tackles. One of the rotational cornerbacks is out this week. So again, just the typical bye week rest. I would expect all those guys back in pads for next week because again, we're just seeing those guys getting sat and get a little extra rest with the bye.
Elijah Page came out today with both the knee braces on. I'm kind of done predicting what the future looks like for him because I've been wrong. Thought he was going to be back a couple weeks ago. That hasn't been the case. I think Lincoln Riley was asked about him either at the end of last week or earlier this week, and said the bye week will make it easier for them to make a decision on whether he can play. He was technically available against Notre Dame. He suited up, but it seemed more like an injury thing than a benching to me, but I don't know, Chris. Am I off on that?
I think it was more of an injury thing than a benching thing, at least from what I understand. So didn't want to fully push him back in there, Notre Dame probably would have attacked him pretty heavily coming off the knee injury. And again, it's wet out there, slippery. Didn't want to re-aggravate anything. So unless it was an emergency, I don't think he was going to go. I don't think he was going to go into the game. So I think they just wanted to get him to the second bye week, get him that extra 2 weeks of rest, and then potentially have him back for Nebraska. But again, we've been wrong on this before. It seems like they're really slow playing him because it is a knee injury. That's something he was dealing with in camp before the season started. So again, just those are tricky.
Killian O'Connor is still out. He was listed as questionable on the most recent availability report before the Notre Dame game, but didn't suit up. He is continuing to come back from that knee injury, so we'll see maybe next week if he is healthier and could potentially get back into the mix. We saw Big General Reed obviously continuing to work at center, so no big surprise there. Okay, after practice, heard from D'Anton Lynn. Just said USC has to execute better. That was the extent of it.
I mean, at the end of the day, football is simple. Do your job, do your assignment, and USC did not play simple, sound-based football in that game, and that loss, and that's why they lost. It's a big reason why they lost that game, and yeah, he spoke about it. You asked him, I believe it was you that asked him about, how do you fix the missed assignments and the gap issues and all that. Practice. And every time you see it, you got to make an example out of it. And he also ended up by saying, 1 of 11. We've heard this before. It's classic coach cliche speak, but every person on that field, all 11 people have their one job. Everyone does their one job. You're going to end up having a pretty good defense. If you don't trust the guy next to you to do your job, maybe you think you got to do their job, that's when things fall apart. People were going the wrong gaps. You had 2 people in the same gaps. You had people not covering their gaps. People were not doing their job. At the end of the day, he said, this is a accountability thing. Everyone on the defense has to take accountability, starting with him. Those were his words, starting with me. He said there were calls that he wished that he could have back or made differently after watching the film. So he is putting a lot of the blame on himself. But again, everyone needs to take accountability on the defensive side of the ball for what happened on Saturday and what has happened a couple times this season.
Lynn brought up how Jaden Walker is an example of someone who they now fully trust, whereas at the beginning of the year, they liked what he was doing, but they didn't feel totally comfortable with him out there. They now feel that way, and he brought that up on his own. I wonder, potentially we could see him play even more at linebacker. Lynn also brought up how if he had a coaching point in a film study session for Desmond Stevens, then that's important for Jaden Walker to pay attention to. He brought up Walker by name, and Tamir Robinson, he brought him up by name, and then he talked about the same thing with Kamari Ramsey, and then the guys behind Kamari Ramsey who Lynn mentioned, it was Gentry, it was Matai Tagovailoa, and then it was Alex Graham. Probably a stretch to say like the guys he mentioned are in line to play, but the fact that Walker came up twice, Desmond Stevens didn't have a great game against Notre Dame. If there is a change to the starting lineup, maybe something in the middle of the defensive line. I think the edge rushers, we know what's going on there. At linebacker, I think Jaden Walker could potentially start. And then I think in the defensive backfield, unless one of those nickels emerges, we kind of know the situation there. So going into this Nebraska game, you think Jaden Walker has a chance to start?
as you pointed out, like, middle linebacker is kind of the only real position you could feel like a real shakeup coming. Again, we're just kind of having a conversation right now. You brought up Jaden Walker to Lincoln Riley on Tuesday, and then, as you said, Dan Lynn brought up Jay Walk all on his own accord as the example he was talking about. So I think there is a buzz brewing among fans, and I guess us as well, is like, maybe try Jaden Walker out. I mean, Desmond Stevens has struggled this season, and really talented player, but just hasn't been clicking for him on the field. And Notre Dame was probably his worst game of the season. Just being out of position, making the wrong decision at times. So I know he finished with like 10 tackles, I think, but at the end of the day, they lost, and one of the big reasons was their run defense was so poor. So I would say, if I'm going to make a change, maybe it's coming after this bye week. Jaden Walker has looked good in spot play. He's been aggressive. He's been reacting. He's been reacting really fast. He's been making quick decisions. So I think at some point you do have to kind of look at that middle of that defense with the linebacker, and maybe that's the switch up they make at the end of this at this bye week and in these 2 weeks going to Nebraska, because you got a position here to win 9-10 games, but if you see that defensive performance they saw on Saturday consistently, it's not going to happen. So maybe they do make the change, for the final stretch of this season. And we're big Jaden Walker believers. He has developed a lot since he got here as like an edge rusher out of Michigan, the lowest rated prospect in that class. Someone Danton Lynn hand-picked. That was his first commitment that he picked for the end of the class. So I think Jaden Walker's got a lot of potential. We were really high on Desmond Stevens. We still are, but a lot of growth has to happen. He still needs a lot of development still needs to happen with him, but maybe you try something else with number 31.
And so much of it is game plan and matchup dependent, where Notre Dame is one of the best running teams in the country. Nebraska, Emmett Johnson's a good running back, but it's a little bit of a different equation, where if they do still have a lot of confidence in Desmond Stevens, it's a road game, which is hard, but it could be a softer landing spot than a Notre Dame game on the road. So it'll be interesting to see what they think, their evaluation in the bye week. I'm sure they're doing a lot of self-scouting in that scenario. Rob Ryan will be involved as well, so that's certainly something to pay attention to. But I think you talked about how what I said earlier rings true. I don't really know what other changes they can make outside of maybe if Alex Graham continues to come on, or maybe they make a change in the middle of the defensive line for a bigger body if they're going up against a running team. But they kind of are what they are a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you asked about the sense of urgency of trying to get a nickel ready to be able to move Kamari Ramsey back to his natural position, be able to move him around in different spots, and he spoke about that. But that's the only other thing I could think of as being sort of a major shakeup. I don't know, Jakeem Stewart starting, maybe that would be the other thing, but at the end of the day, I think linebacker is the one you're kind of looking at. Like, I think we can definitely be better there, and maybe for that to happen, we need to make a switch there.
We heard from DeCarlos Nicholson and Christian Pierce, two DBs. So I talked about this with Ryan on the Peristyle podcast today. Rewatching that Notre Dame game, DeCarlos Nicholson, to me, was one of the only guys on that defense who it looked like was taking that game personally and was playing with an edge, a chip on his shoulder, was playing mad. Jeremiah Love, yes, he had some success, but Nicholson, every time he ran near him, Nicholson made sure he gave him a shot, and they would talk trash. I just like that fire, I like that passion, because we didn't get a lot of that from USC's defense. So I asked Nicholson today, why was that so important to you? And he just said, I love USC, I love this place. Last year left a bad taste in my mouth. And then just talking to other players, Chris, not even just Pierce, but it seems like there are other guys who kind of talk about like it's a loss, but all losses motivate us, where I feel like Nicholson took it more personally. And when we talk about rivalries in college football, like the transfer portal and the playoff, like it's just a little different now, but it was refreshing for me to hear Nicholson talk about how he took this game personally, because I think a lot of fans who've watched the USC Notre Dame rivalry for decades feel that same way, and to get that passion from Nicholson, you wish you could have gotten it from some more guys, but it was great to see Nicholson have that passion on a day that wasn't as great for USC fans.
And a guy who's a transfer.
Yeah.
Remember, he's a transfer. He's not someone who's from Southern California. He's from Mississippi, and he already has that kind of feel of someone who, I don't want to say hates Notre Dame, but he understands
I think he does.
Okay, maybe he does. He understands the feeling of how important this game is to fans. And yeah, if you had like more players on USC side that kind of played with that similar edge, it's probably a closer game. And especially in the run defense. But yeah, he played with a notable edge as a skinny 6'3" guy thumping with some of those running backs who were running all over USC. At least somebody was out there. I think Christian Pierce did a little bit of that too. He was landing some hard hits too. But as you said, the comment, you're not vibing with the company lineup. It's all losses are the same. Yeah, that's fine. I think there has to be a little bit extra. I know you're trying not to say like every game is important, every game is the same. But Notre Dame's a little bit more important. UCLA is a little bit more important. There are important games that you need to take it to another level when you're out in that field, because they're playing like it's another game, a different game, and they feel like it's a rivalry. So you need to match that output out there, especially when you're playing on the road.
We can move on, but the head coach is responsible for setting the tone. And when you only have a few guys who it looked like were taking that game personally, am I out of line saying I think it starts with the head coach? Like, I think Marcus Freeman gets those guys pissed off to play USC, and I don't, like, obviously they're motivated, and I'm not saying like they go in there and they're not trying, but I think there's some truth to them treating it like just another game, where I don't know if that's the case on the other side.
Hey, Lincoln Riley says he loves rivalry games. Says he loves these kind of battles. Red River Shootout, love to be part of that. Love to be part of this one. That seems like he cares about rivalries, but yeah, we didn't really get any been showing USC Notre Dame highlights or anything like that all week, anything like that. So not that we asked about it, but didn't sort of get that vibe that it was kind of a big rivalry week.
We can leave it there. So who else did we hear from, Chris? DeCarlos, Christian Pierce,
Braylon Shelby.
I don't know if were you in that scrum?
I had to leave that scrum because I had to go man the camera for DeCarlos, but I did get one question. I was like, I know it's a loss, but you did get your first career pick. He said, yeah, that was great. He was watching the ball the whole time. He said it kind of felt like high school to him. He played a lot of off-ball linebacker in Texas, so kind of reminiscent of that, dropping back, go up and getting it. So easy pick for him. Boneheaded play by CJ Carr should not have happened, but at the end of the day, it is a nice stat. But he was like, yeah, we wanted the win. Would have traded that pick for a win, hands down. He didn't say that. That's what I'm interpreting. But yeah,
of course.
He wishes they got the win. But it was nice to have that kind of cool moment in a big rivalry game.
And then the last guy, King Miller, the running back, spoke today. Talked about how it was an honor to be the starting running back against Notre Dame, starting running back for USC. And during the bye week, he said he's very critical of himself. He's doing a lot of self-scouting, and he just wants to continue to work hard and continue to keep pushing and continue just to do what he's doing, which has been take that running back spot by storm. I think they have a lot to work on, obviously, after that Notre Dame game, but King Miller seems excited, confident, and just really down to earth. He's a good kid.
No, absolutely a great kid. And obviously riding high after the Michigan game, kind of came back down to earth a little bit with this road start. His first one was really impressive to have as a walk-on Notre Dame USC fan. To have it against Notre Dame, that must have felt pretty cool. But obviously USC's run game was very limited against that Notre Dame front. So hopefully they can have a bounce-back performance against Nebraska, and maybe you can break off another 100-yard game. Had couple nice runs, him, Brian Jackson, but at the end of the day they were bottled up pretty heavily. So we'll see what they come out with after 2 weeks.